movie fans and fight fans of all ages. Let's get ready to rumble! Mama's boy here, he's big, he's dumb, he's slow, he's stupid, and he ain't got no style!
I just thought this movie has to go back to the basic.
What was hard to find is there were people who loved the characters, who knew everything about them and had seen every movie 15 times, but didn't have the experience. And then there were people who had more experience, but kind of were like, oh yeah, I think I saw one back in the theater way back when. So we got a really good script in. It was overly long and overly complicated and very, very dense.
Wow, this is great, you know?
You're slow, you're stupid, and you're all washed up.
Freddy versus Jason. Place your bets.
This film was doomed from the start of production. Scratch that. The movie was doomed during the 13 years of development hell that remained dormant until Stokely Chaffin and Ronny Yu became involved with the project. I really want to like this movie, because not one person I've come across says this is a bad film. They either enjoy it for what it is, or just compare it to the rest of the movies in each slasher series, they think the movie is passable. Not me though. I think this movie is lazy, horribly written, and performed with no heart. And I also think the movie of this magnitude should not get a pass. We sure as hell didn't get past Alien vs. Predator, so why should we make this movie any different? I spread the blame equally around the parties for why this film came out the way it did. You can't just put fault towards Ronny, the writers Mark Swift and Damian Shannon, and Stokely Chaffin, one of the top faces and producers for this movie, because by the time those four were working on the project, there had been 17 different versions of the script. I've never heard of a movie with 17 different versions of a script. 12 different writers all together on this project, and out of the 17 scripts, nearly 70% of them had to deal with a cult called the Fredheads, who used Jason's heart to resurrect him.
Rewrites on the same story. That all involved this cult called the Fredheads, and then Jason gets resurrected through his heart being thrown into a lake. So most of them were with that same storyline with a girl named Lizzie.
And what are we not seeing Freddy vs. Jason? This cult of Fredheads was the plot point of using Jason's heart at Camp Crystal Lake to bring back Freddy. We're instead introduced to Will and Laurie with their subplot, which is honestly lackluster and boring, and ends abruptly when Laurie runs from her home near the climax of the film. This means that they were using the other 30% of scripts that were written, which maybe could have helped since less writers could boggle up the script, but the script was hacked to shit to the point where only remnants of what this movie could have been were left. This is because Stokely Chaffin timed the original script of the film, which came out to almost be 2.5 hours long, but then was cut down to not wanting to make the magnum opus of slasher films.
You know, there's some problems here, but it looks pretty good. Let's see what we get when the script comes in. So we got a really good script in. It was overly long and overly complicated and very, very dense. And so we timed the script, came in at 2 hours, 28 minutes, and we're like, you know, this may be the American Beauty of horror films, but it's not American Beauty, and it probably shouldn't be 2.5 hours long.
And trust me, they were not getting the American Beauty of horror films with this movie, and the fact that she even thinks that proves me she knows nothing of horror. It is really hard to hate on Ronny Yu, because as a director I think he is amazing. This man gets so focused on a project, doing table read after table read, performing every scene with his second unit director, Poon Han Sang, in their hotel room while having an artist draw the storyboard. Watching him on set during the behind the scenes was an absolute treat. The way he communicated what he wanted in such a passionate way, having fun while making jokes and tossing others around like he's Jason, I couldn't get enough of it, but at the end of the day I don't think he was a good fit. Stokely has specifically said she wanted somebody who was familiar with the franchises.
What was hard to find is there were people who loved the characters, who knew everything about them and had seen every movie 15 times, but didn't have the experience. And then there were people who had more experience, but kind of were like, oh yeah, I think I saw one back in the theater way back when. And we were like, what are you doing here? Like, why would you want to take this on if you don't care about these characters?
But Ronny Yu had only seen the first movie for both respective series. They hired him based on the fact of him being on the top tier list for directors of the movie, as well as Robert Shaw wanting an Asian approach during this horror film. Going for their own feelings, they went against the principles that they sought for this film.
And the idea of having a Asian point of view and Asian style seemed to me to offer the possibility of bringing a new approach to a horror film than some of the more matter-of-fact, straightforward horror director.
Why don't you go find yourself a pig to fuck? Yeah.
And Ronny Yu went a direction with this film that sounds more and more baffling every time you think of it.
Old Hollywood monster movie, like the horror movie, like, you know, Vampire and Frankenstein versus Wolfman, or the Swamp Things, you know, all that. And I just thought this movie has to go back to the basic.
And you might think that that would be a good idea. With only seeing the first Nightmare and Friday, how can you get more basic than that? But this film feels like such a departure to what we know. Ronny and the writers clearly spent more time trying to do the action horror, which fails miserably, instead of trying to focus on plot or characters that drive our care for this movie. Why do I even care if Will watches Laurie's dad kill Laurie's mom or not, when I don't even care about Laurie herself? You think back to the original movies, especially Nightmare on Elm Street, and you see a plethora of personality in each one of the characters. Ronny Yu even did Jason dirty by not having Kane Hodder be cast the role, but Ken Kirshner instead, due to wanting Jason to have more of an overpowering and big statue type character. This left them with an actor who portrayed Jason in a slow, stiff manner like a pseudo-Frankenstein's monster. The one thing that Ronny said he didn't want for Jason either, which is another example of the production letting their emotions compromise the principle for this film. It seemed like Ronny wanted to make a Western horror movie, just not a Freddy vs. Jason movie. Freddy and Jason are even retconned in this film, with Freddy needing kids not only to remember him, but being afraid of him to stay alive, which isn't a terrible retcon when you think of it. Nancy does stop Freddy by not being afraid of him anymore, or when there's no children on Elm Street anymore, so there's literally no kids even know who Freddy is at this point. It's a new addition to the lore, but from what we've seen in the franchise, the rule makes sense.
Okay, I'm all right.
Not strong enough yet. Well, I will be soon enough.
Jason's retcon, on the other hand, is not something I can let slip so easily. Having Jason afraid of water is one of the dumbest weaknesses I've ever seen for a slasher villain. I understand that Jason drowned as a child, which would cause him to be nervous around water if we hadn't seen him around and in the lake since the incident, and I shouldn't have to bring up the obvious answer why this is so dumb. But Jason takes Manhattan, people. He literally gets to Manhattan by swimming to a boat and then being surrounded by water for most of the film, and we never see any hesitation or sign of fear from Jason the entire movie. This is one of those things where Damien Shannon and Mark Swift left out when writing for the remake of Friday the 13th in 2009, and I can't stress enough that those type of decisions is what makes that movie good. Maybe I would have been okay at Jason's retcon, or at least more okay with it, if the rest of the fight that goes with it wasn't one of the worst things I've ever seen in a major horror movie. You might have already suspected that Freddy vs. Jason was no horror film, but by the time you get to Freddy tossing Jason around like a ragdoll on a pinball machine while dry humping the air, the movie confirms it for us while we're watching the black comedy. For such a great director trying to be in tune with his project, I don't understand why Ronny Yu would shoot this the way he did. And this is what I mean by him being an amazing director, just not for this project. He treated this as a professional wrestling match, and I'm not even over-exaggerating with that. Look at the way he advertised this movie.
Movie fans and fight fans of all ages, let's get ready to rumble! Introducing first, to my right, with over 1,000 career kills, he's come back to life 7 times. Hailing from Elm Street, the man with the killer right hand, the Springwood slasher, Freddy!
Hell, in my opinion, they had one of the best lines ever in slasher history just to leave it out of the final film.
Freddy versus Jason.
Place your bets.
I will admit, even though the scene is bad, doesn't mean the scene itself looks bad. I can praise that Ronny Yu said he was tired of the big blockbuster films of the early 2000s, horror movies especially, just using CGI, which is why more than not, a lot of these effects are practical. My favorite shot in the film is when Freddy's launched himself out of the water and onto the dock Camp Crystal Lake. The wire work is amazing, and the behind the scenes makes out to be the grand spectacle that it is.
There's so many different talents that are.
I hate the final fight, but the practical effects were nice, and I do think it was a good idea to put the cement wheel in the middle of the playing field, or how the stunt actor for Jason was engulfed in so much fire that he couldn't see in his suit and had to be directed by the crew through the cornfield party scene.
I wish I could lie and tell you that was me because it looks really cool, but it's not. I mean, that's my stunt double.
So yes, even though the movie itself is trash, the kills and the set pieces were shot and made with a lot of work and talent. And the set pieces aren't the only thing that shines in the film when you have an actor like Robert Englund involved in your project. You can just tell he gave it his all, and Robert has had so much fun on set that you can't help but enjoy most of the scenes he was in, which is nice, especially knowing that he might never play Freddy again in a full-length feature film, but Freddy is the star in this show. He's even the one to get the plot started when he resurrects Jason so that Jason can terrorize Elm Street, with Freddy getting the credits so kids will remember him again. Maybe that's why I give Freddy such a big pass in his retcon, because it correlates directly to the plot, and without it we wouldn't have a movie. But even then, the retcon does make sense with Freddy's character. Nancy only defeated him due to her letting go of his fear towards Freddy, and Freddy was so weak at the start of Freddy's Dead from nobody being afraid of him either, and no kids in Springwood anymore. So for Freddy to need people to remember him and ultimately fear him so he wouldn't fade away works pretty well in my opinion. That doesn't mean they don't give us choppy exposition lines about his powers though.
You didn't forget about me, did you?
Oh, that's right. Everyone forgot. That's why they weren't afraid anymore. That's why I needed Jason to kill for me to get them to remember. But now he just won't stop.
This retcon isn't the only sign Ronny didn't understand Freddy as much as he should, and the two writers are better at writing Jason than Freddy due to them messing up on one of Freddy's big powers in the lore. When Freddy hurts you in the dream world, it affects you in the real world as well. Even in the first film, Nancy is burned by Freddy in the boiler room, which burns her in her classroom, on top of Nancy grabbing Freddy's hat while in the dream world only to bring it in real life. This power and rule established is how Nancy brings Freddy in real world to kill him. Hell, Lore uses the same logic to bring Freddy in the real world herself, when she rips off Freddy's ear while dreaming, only for it to be brought back with her when she wakes up and for it to turn into maggots for some reason. Did his hat do that in the original? And you might say, Hunter, his ear decayed to maggots due to no longer being part of him, so it died off. Which makes no sense since Freddy is technically undead to begin with, so there's nothing keeping that body part alive. It should either stay as a prop or Freddy should turn to maggots the moment he's pulled out of the dream world, which doesn't happen. That's not even the worst example of this, since we have a scene of Kay in the nurse's room at the high school. Kay nods off while waiting on Laurie, and while she passes out, Freddy pops out from a magazine and takes her nose off with his glove, only for her to wake up and not even have a nosebleed. Yeah, and again, you might say, well, Hunter, you already told us that Freddy needs kids' fears to be powerful enough to hurt anybody, so at this point in the film, he just wasn't strong enough yet. And I hear your cries, and to that I say, this scene happened after Mark let the whole school in on Freddy when trying to warn Laurie.
1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. You know why they sing that? Because that's when he comes for you. In your dreams. You're lucky to be alive.
And this was clearly enough to make the kids of Springwood remember Freddy, because what would you know, Freddy was going to be powerful enough to kill Debs at the cornfield party if Jason didn't cut him out of his kill. With there being nothing important happening with Freddy in between Mark scaring the whole school of his lore on him, so why is Freddy strong enough to murder a kid by the time it's dark enough for the kids at the party? But when everybody has Freddy fresh on their minds in the hallway, Freddy can't even hurt Kay. Really, was there something we missed?
So David Goyer came in, and what he did honestly was collapse everything good that was in it.
Oh yeah, there was a ton we missed. It's no wonder Freddy barely gets a kill in this movie when the writers will just make him weak or strong whenever they want. At least what Freddy lacks in kills he makes up in personality. Freddy is creepy, manipulative, and bloodlustful as he's ever been, and Freddy does not disappoint in his cheesy one-liners, either it be with Jason or the teens.
Come on, give Daddy a kiss. Your eyes say no, but my mouth says yes, yes. Penny for your thoughts, Chief. Oh, scared.
Help the kid!
Can't you see I'm busy here?
You mean you're not coming?
It's not my fault this bitch is dead on her feet.
Jason in this film is interesting, not in his performance, the way he moves. He's boring as shit in that manner, but he's interesting in the way that the studio used him for this film. I already told you how the role of Jason was given to Ken Kirshner due to his stature, but I also told you how the role was played like Frankenstein, which was a huge mistake. You can even tell when he's being boring and when Ronny Yu has to direct him to be more like the Jason that we deserve.
This is like Ronny Yu coming through. That motivation is there. It's like Jason uses that to open the door for you. So it's like, it has to be like...
I know Jason is just a killer who never talks, but that doesn't mean he isn't played with personality. Every time Jason busts through a door or does a sharp turn or hell, even being killed, you see his traits pop out. In this movie though, with everything that Jason does, it feels less and less reactionary, going from a former human being to a zombie, and now he's a robot, just on a program to kill. And if there's anything I can give Jason in Freddy vs. Jason, is that he is a killing machine. Jason gets almost every single kill in this movie, at least 10 times the amount of kills that Freddy got. Just look at this. And there are some pretty nice kills in this film. I love the bed kill at the start of the movie. I just think it's dumb to put the best kill as your first one though. You think Jason X would have taught them this lesson, but no. Even though I enjoy watching Jason kill as many teens as he can, Freddy has a much more interesting and complex style of slaughtering. A machete just will never compare. I wish I had more to say about the character, but the two most interesting things about Jason in the movie is his dumb retcon and how they butchered what he was supposed to be, and there's only so many times you can talk about that. I may not like the way that Jason is written, and bits and pieces of Freddy, but surely they must have saved themselves with a batch of disposable teens, right? You would think, but no. And I want to give Mark Swift and Damian Shannon a little bit of a break from how bad the dialogue is, but they wrote one of my favorite Friday the 13th films, being the remake, so I know that these two know how to write fun, douchey characters, not just douchey characters. Trent is so much more fun than Trey is, and I think if the teens were written a little more like college students of the remake, the film would have turned out so much better. Maybe Mark and Damian only know how to write adults, because I hate almost everybody in this movie, and a prime example of this is Trey, Dib's boyfriend. And I know they make Trey to be an asshole that he is, so none of us feel bad, and it's justified that he gets such a brutal death, but I also think there's a proper way to do that. For one, because Trey is the first real-life death, and it happens so early in the film, you don't care about his character at all. He is literally just an asshole you want off-screen. But look at Trent from the Friday the 13th remake. This guy was an asshole to all of his friends, even when he had to be nice to them, and you don't feel bad for him at all when he gets his brutal death. The thing is though, because Trent was such a funny character and his absurd amount of entertainment, that you do miss his presence for the rest of the film. Just listen to these two while they're with their girls. Here's asshole Trey.
Answer my prayers, thank you.
Whoa, babe. Tell you about kissing me after you smoked, huh?
Babe, you know I don't like to be touched after, okay?
Fine, I'll go have a shower then.
Good. Your hair smells like menthols anyway.
Asshole.
See, it's a really douchey thing to say, but in the worst way possible. Now listen to Trent.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Your tits are stupendous.
Wow, you really know how to make a girl feel special, huh?
That's what I do.
Trent's lines here are so absurd that's hilarious. Thinking about somebody talking like that during sex is douchey, but again, in a fun way.
Your tits are fucking just so juicy, dude. You got perfect nipple placement, baby.
I know I'm dwelling on Trey a lot as a character, and I say character because frankly, I enjoyed seeing Jesse Hunch, the actor who played Trey, behind the scenes. But it's because Trey is just a prime example in a batch of bad apples, and I find it a shame that characters are written the way they are, especially when I know Mark and Damian can do better. It doesn't get any better for the other characters too, when every teen just wants to be an asshole in this movie, to the point where it doesn't even feel like they could be real. We get pieces of dialogue from people like Pigfucker, the guy hosting the cornfield party.
This fucking guy.
Well, hey, Jethro! This is a rave, not a Halloween party! Why don't you go find yourself a pig to fuck?
He He deserved to get that flame machete through his chest, but they make every character like this so you never feel bad when they die. Okay, maybe not you guys, Letterman and Mark, but that's only because you guys went out fighting and protecting. It's not like this is a complaint just for the side characters. Kay, one of our mains, played by one of the Destiny Childs, is like this throughout the whole movie.
No. It was Mo. Yeah.
Either one, I kill him.
Okay, well, who'd you fuck then?
God, whatever. Look, I fucked the ball guy and I married Larry. Jesus, is this what we're doing all night? Cause y'all, this is really stank.
I was playing a drinking game with some of the lower primates. And I guess I'm penalized for my ability to read above a 4th grade level.
Linderman, you know, I always pictured you as a straight-up bedwetter. What kind of faggot runs around in a Christmas sweater? You're not even scary. You're not even scary. And let's talk about the butter knives. What is with the butter knives? You trying to compensate for something? Maybe coming up a little short there between the legs?
I know it's an early 2000s film, so we get lines like this all the time, but it just doesn't sit right with being such a big movie like this. Even though most of the characters are insufferable human trash, some actually stand out as good characters. Will and Laurie are saints, but they're boring. The real hero of the story is Mark, Will's best friend and roommate in the psychiatric ward. Not only is Mark a vital part of the story, getting Will out of the hospital, but he's the most entertaining teen in the whole movie. He loves Uno just like the rest of us.
Someone else got killed in the same house. You think that's a coincidence? 2 murders in one house?
Kurt, how many times do I have to tell you, man? I don't do checkers. I'm an Uno guy, all right? So go grab the fucking Uno deck and we'll play, okay? Please. Thank you.
As well as getting the best line in the whole movie.
You want some free advice? Coffee. Make friends with it. More!
As well as getting one of the worst lines in the movie.
1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. You know why they sing that? Because that's when he comes for you.
Yes, that's what
he comes for you.
Means.
Without Mark, Will never gets free, would never have found Laurie, and Will uses Mark's car, house, and brain to learn everything he can about the town and Freddy Krueger, and he feels more like a real person than anybody else. All Mark wants to do is prove to people that Freddy killed his brother and to warn the rest of the kids so they don't fall into the same fate, but due to his trauma, the drugs he was forced to take over the years, and the recklessness he has, Mark just causes the kids to remember Freddy Krueger and overall spread his fear.
My brother said it's our fear that gives him his power.
Yeah, well, you sure as hell spread enough fear today at school.
Holy shit. You're right, they wanted to forget Freddy so they wouldn't fear him. That's... What if I screwed up the town's plan?
No.
Fuck! This fucker's gonna spread like the plague, man! Kids are gonna start falling asleep. It's gonna...
And once Mark gets tired enough and dozing off to the point of seeing Freddy, you know he's screwed.
Somebody please wake me up!
I'm glad they give him a good death scene. It was a nice send-off. There is clunky exposition lines from Freddy posing like his deceased brother about how he needs kids to remember him so he can get his powers again, like we weren't there for all the other times he's brought up that plot point, and he wants Mark to be the one that makes them remember. Mark, being the hero that he is though, and not wanting to make the same mistakes, tells Freddy no, so Freddy delivers the message himself. And I like this kill. It's not as brutal or creative as some of Freddy's other kills, but I think the pun works enough in Freddy's favor, and the character is likable enough where you won't forget the kill anytime soon. I really hope you enjoy that kill as well, because it's Freddy's only kill in the whole movie. It's a nice kill, don't get me wrong, but Freddy is arguably the most creative slasher villain of all time, and for him to only get this kill is a waste opportunity, which is what this whole movie feels like. A lot of people say that this fight is what saves the movie, and for me that's just not the case. It is an entertaining fight, being much more complex and logical compared to the boiler room fight they shared earlier in the movie, but take logical with a grain of salt, since the fight is extremely Roadrunner-like, and I'm not a fan of how silly the team treated this fight. The one-liners from Freddy are bad, and I'm already not a fan of the action horror, especially when the team behind the project is just treating it as action comedy. Hell, Freddy kicks Jason in the balls only to damage his own leg, because I guess Jason has no feeling there because he's dead, or he has balls of steel because of a hell. You know what, I'm done talking about Jason's balls. I'm not the one in the movie trying to make out with him.
Oh, man. Oh, shit. Oh, shit.
will say I do like Linderman's death in the climax and how he gets to say goodbye to Kate because he bled out instead of being straight up killed in one hit.
Jesus, Lindemann, you're really hurt.
No. Don't worry about me. Just a scratch. Just go get help, okay?
What?
Okay, I'm just gonna rest here a minute.
Lindemann.
I'm fine. Here. Really? No, get out of here. Go get help.
But you...
Just go.
Okay, but I'm gonna be back as soon as I can.
I can't say the same for Kay though, but she kinda deserved it.
What kind of faggot runs around in a Christmas sweater?
It is very cool seeing the wirework stuff, seeing Robert Englund jump on that cement wheel, but even with that, the fight is too goofy up until they're on the docks, where Jason and Freddy have this brutal one-on-one of just slashing and stabbing with body parts coming off and through each other. It's a lot more gruesome and gory, making it a lot more horror-based too, which is what these fights should have been, not Freddy shooting CO2 tanks at Jason. Before this part of the fight, I was just tuned out. Overall, I just can't bring myself to enjoy this film. It's a prominent example of the behind-the-scenes scrambles just bleeding out onto the movie's final project. The studio went against their best wishes and principles so they could butcher a film that was already burning in development hell. It's no wonder a sequel was never made after this movie. We all know that there was one in the works with Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash the Evil Dead, and never came to fruition in motion picture form though, only through the page of a comic book. I did try to get the comic book for this review, but my comic book store just sold it a week before I got there. Maybe another time. This film is bad. Freddy vs. Jason's pace is sloppy from the hours worth of pages they cut. 90% of the characters you wish were killed off a tray at the start, and I enjoyed watching the behind the scenes stuff 2 times for this video more than I ever enjoyed watching the film itself, and I've seen Freddy vs. Jason a lot. The American Beauty of horror movies. Why does Stokely ever think American Beauty can be that bad?